So, Spencer, 2024 has been an interesting year for the two of us. We have attempted to record not once, not twice, but this is the thrice time we have attempted to record, and this time it happened.
Third time's a charm.
Yeah, I guess so. I will say, though, and I think maybe not to just spoil the whole thing here, but I think you would agree that of the three movies that we were meant to talk about this year, this is the least fun in a lot of ways. It's maybe not fun is not the right word. How fun can an adaptation, or I guess an adaptation, but a retelling of Hamlet really be? The story of Hamlet ain't exactly a positive, uplifting story, including the original ending of Hamlet. The movie decides to do something vastly different, but the story of Hamlet is not an uplifting tale that people sit around and talk about positively. It's a very much one of the, I would say, like the Shakespearean Shakespeare thing of all of them.
Yeah, but it is Hamlet's pretty funny though.
Well, yeah, I mean, Rosencrantz and Guildenstern are. I mean, look, Rosencrantz and Guildenstern are dead is one of my top five like things of all time. So I can't pretend Hamlet existing isn't a good thing, but like Hamlet itself is, it's not an uplifting story, but it is pretty funny.
It is, yeah. Shakespeare got a lot of laughs out of it. It's interesting. I mean, I guess I'll just I'll lay down on the table that I wish this movie was not an adaptation of Hamlet. Which I guess goes to the center of it, but it's there's some really interesting stuff in it, and some of it is Hamlet related. But I guess I'll just say that like its approach to some of the issues around the Kashmir conflict. It feels to me like doing that through a Hamlet adaptation trivializes the topic and also the way that they're going to some severe trouble to shoot in Kashmir. And I don't want to be, I don't know. This is a really interesting kind of problem movie because there is really stuff that I like about it. And I'm not enough of an expert on, Hindi cinema. There's, definitely a fair amount that I've seen, and this is not exactly like anything that I've seen before. So I guess I would put out that disclaimer before, I go into stating problems with it. But I will, it kind of hits me as like the Hamlet part of it trivializes the Kashmir part of it for me. And especially given that in the middle of the film, it really does take the Kashmir conflict fairly seriously. And it's not something that I know a lot about, but I kind of feel like, I want to know more about this and I want to get into the reality. But then I'm sort of pulled back out by the Hamlet of it all. So that's my thesis statement.
There it is. Ladies and gentlemen, on this episode of the Kulturecast, I am still your host, Chris Stachiw, much to the chagrin of many, and I'm joined this year finally by film professor all the way from the Midwest. He is, I don't know, we have some great conversations on this show, Spencer Parsons.
Hello. Glad to be here.
Ready to talk Shakespeare because on this episode of the Kulturecast, we are still watching Indian cinema because it is my birthday and that's what I wanted to do this year. So this episode will show up. Thank you. This episode will show up on the Bollywood Cinema Club feed as well because it's an Indian cinema film. And we are going to be talking about a Indian retelling of Hamlet titled Haider from 2014.
हैदर, मेरा इंतकाम लेना मेरे भाई से। उसकी उन दोनों आंखों में गोलियां दागना जिन आंखों से उसने तुम्हारी मां पर फरेब डाले थे। चले ही चले दिए से चले रहे सारी जिंदगी, वरना तू भी डिसअपीयर हो जाएगा अपने बाप की तरह। मैं खुद के अपने भाई गायब है कई महीनों से।
डिसअपीयर्ड लोगों की बीवियां आधी बेवा कहलाती हैं यहाँ, हाफ विडोज।
एक फूंक से मियां सब उड़ गया धुआं, वो जो सांस की एक फांस थी वो निकल गई जो खराश थी।
I have loved you more than my life.
माँ जब झूठ बोले ना नहीं अच्छी लगती।
दिल की गर सुनूं तो है, दिमाग की तुम्हें नहीं, जान लूं कि जान दूं, मैं रहूं कि मैं नहीं, बदला
Hello? Hello? Mic testing 1 2 3 hello. आवाज आ रही है आप लोगों को? Hello, 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 hello.
So the film is directed by Vishwal Bhardwaj, written by Bisharat Peer, and again Vishwal Bhardwaj, and the story by Vishwal Bhardwaj, but again, it is also just kind of Hamlet. So it's based on Hamlet by William Shakespeare. Who'da thunk it? And yeah, it is, like Spencer kind of already mentioned, a retelling of Hamlet with some changes made, some choices made that definitely change, like you've already alluded to. The thematic meaning of Hamlet is kind of played with. But yeah, so if you kind of are familiar with the story of Hamlet, Haider is played by Shahid Kapoor. His father is played by Narendra Jha, who is Dr. Hilal Mir, who dies at the beginning of the movie. He is the Hamlet stand-in. And then we have Tabu, who plays his mother, and KK Manan, who plays his uncle, the Gertrude and Claudius stand-ins. And the always fantastic Shraddha Kapoor plays both Ophelia and the Horatio character, because they don't differentiate in this one. And then Irfan Khan gets to play the ghost of Shahid Kapoor's father, which is in and of itself a separate character in this retelling, not one and the same. And Lalit Peramu plays the Polonius stand-in as well. Oh, and Amir Bashir, as well as the Laertes stand-in, which, yeah, like, just sitting here and saying that all the this to this, it's like, this is too much. It's not needed. This movie could be genuinely, again, this movie is entertaining, but the Hamlet parts of it take away from the movie for me. And I think this movie would be a lot better if it was just its own thing. So yeah, just to give my opinion immediately, but Spencer, I'm going to kick it to you. What did you think of Haider?
Yeah, I think it's an interesting movie, and it did. I've been kind of out of the gate. I'm being critical, but it's interesting. It did grow on me a bit as it went along. It definitely, the back half has the most exciting stuff in it. I'll be perfectly frank. In the front half of the movie, and it's a 2.5 hour movie, so it's nice and long. But in the front half of the movie, it definitely is kind of stiff and doing a lot of setup, and there's a lot of pipe laying for later stuff. I get it, but the movie doesn't really come alive until the ghost arrives.
Yeah.
Which is the beginning of actual Hamlet. You know, the first scene of Hamlet is the ghost's arrival, and the filmmaking kind of becomes a lot more interesting from that point onward. There's a lot more life to it. There's a couple of musical numbers, like, no music for a really long time in this movie, or song and dance kind of stuff. And then there are two, and interesting choices about how to do that, how it's justified, within the film. So there's a one way in which the movie does become like more activated, the more Hamlet-y it gets. But then there's also this kind of side to it where, it feels like a real engagement with this horrific conflict. And it's a horrific conflict that actually, there are like nuclear ramifications to the Kashmir conflict. This is like no joke, whether, locally to South Asia or internationally, for the whole world. This is a really, really serious conflict. And so, maybe part of this is me as like an American audience going, oh wait, I don't know much about this, I want to learn more, and then going, wait, I know enough about Hamlet, like I don't need that part, and that's maybe the combo that doesn't work for me. But to be fair to the filmmaker, this is part of a trilogy of Shakespeare-based works, so there's a longer game, that the director is playing. You are muted.
To your point about this being the third of Vishwal Bharwaj's films that are Hamlet adaptations, this one,
Shakespeare adaptations. The
best I can tell, this is the one that doesn't hew the closest. It's the one that kind of strays the furthest away. And it's also the one that, best I can tell, adds in other things from other things, if that makes sense. Like this adaptation of Hamlet has some some Oedipus Rex stuff to it. There's an Oedipal thing, right? And like that's not in the original Hamlet, right? Not the way this movie goes after.
Not the way that this movie does it, but controversial and just enough that like various various productions have played up the Hamlet and Gertrude kind of thing. But this definitely goes farther into the Oedipal than most.
Which is interesting, right?
Yeah.
I mean, it ultimately goes nowhere, and I feel like the Hamlet of it all is the reason it doesn't go anywhere. Because to your point, so much of it's not that I didn't like of this movie, but it's like, man, this shit is dragging. So much of that is just the Hamlet of it all. And look, I've seen Hamlet a handful of times. I've read it in high school. I read it within the last 10 years. It's fine. I mean, it's not that it's the Shakespeare that I like. It's just, I know the story, like at this point, like, and the story of Hamlet it's a revenge story. And in the actual source material, they take it to the furthest logical final step. And the movie chooses not to do that, which I kind of I don't know. We're talking spoilers, obviously, about this movie, but
He lives. Hamlet lives.
It's fucking weird to me that is the way this movie ends, because it kind of undercuts the entire emotional climax of the movie in a way.
I agree. I mean,
I know what they're going after with the Kashmir stuff. Like I get what they're getting at. That's where the Kashmiri and the Hamlet, Shakespeare do not match, because I get what he's going for by not having him take revenge on, Khurram, his father's killer, and I get it. But that character, the Claudius character, like Hamlet has to die. Like it's part of this. Like, I don't know. It's such a weird change that it doesn't make any sense why you would change it unless it's for the Kashmir of it all, which is fine. But then just don't adapt fucking Hamlet.
Yeah. Oh man. It
makes no sense.
It doesn't really, because it doesn't. Yeah. That he doesn't die doesn't seem to add any new element or revision within the terms of the story or the terms of an adaptation of Hamlet. And then also just given the historical situation, and this is not the part of the play that most people care about so much, but the arrival of Fortinbras, Prince of Norway, at the end of Hamlet is kind of this extra, twisted the knife for the whole situation. Like this royal family, they're all dead. Their bodies are littering the stage, by the end. And it ultimately meant nothing because Fortinbras, Prince of Norway, has arrived anyway and would have taken over. And so the particulars of this line of succession is all rendered meaningless. And of course, this is Shakespeare having some nice ironic jokes.
I mean, it's funny. I mean, it is funny. Like that in and of itself is pretty funny.
Yeah. So there's nothing quite like that within this. I guess there's there are the different. Here's the thing. Hamlet's a story of family skullduggery and of a family coming apart. And I guess I am not as sure that a family coming apart is quite the best vehicle for a geopolitical situation with a lot of animosity between, two sides at war for a really long time and at like enormous risk to the world, to nation states in the area. Yeah. So I just, I guess not to go all sharks and jets, but Romeo and Juliet seems like maybe I wouldn't exactly want to see that one either, adapted to the Kashmir situation, but it just seems like you have like these two kind of clear sides. And what's the nature of the tragedy in Hamlet is that it's this family that is, coming apart from all these different sides. Hamlet goes against his mother because his father is dead, and Claudius, his uncle, has stepped into the breach, and Hamlet is suspicious of how this has happened, and then his girlfriend Ophelia gets pulled into all this, and then we have a number of other characters, Polonius, and the mayhem of Hamlet is actually a thing. It's really like going in all these different directions, right. and not, I don't know, maybe I'm showing my ignorance of this particular geopolitical situation, but and maybe it is mayhem in every possible direction, and so it does make a good metaphor, but maybe it becomes hard for me to quite capture with American eyes. But I don't know. That said, let's talk about some of the good things in the movie. What did you like? What was what jumped out at you, Chris?
Shahid Kapoor is amazing. Yeah. I mean, that's the problem, is like you kind of already alluded to it. Like, there is parts of this movie that are taken whole cloth from Hamlet, and it's just a redone version of some of the monologues. Yeah. And they picked the right person to do them. I mean, I think about the one where we see him once he's shaved his head, and he's kind of, lambasting the idea of like law and order, and what is law and order, if and where do we fit into the India-Pakistan conflict being here. I love what he brings, the energy that he brings. I don't know if I like what KK Manan is doing, but it's an interesting version of that character of Claudius, because he's not as like mustache twirling as you would think. And that character can sometimes be a little mustache twirling. And I also like Tabu as his mother. I think she, in a lot of ways, gets almost as much screen time as Hamlet does. And I think she's fantastic. I think everybody's great in the movie. I mean, when we kind of already mentioned Irfan Khan, but when he shows up as the ghost, the movie really picks up, because his energy is, I don't know, he has really weird energy in this movie, and it kind of is just there. And then, you mentioned the Rosencrantz and Guildenstern characters. In this, they're two guys obsessed with Salman Khan. Absolutely obsessed with Salman Khan, and they work in a video store seemingly. So all the characters have really weird idiosyncrasies to them. But yeah, I again, like the Hamlet thing, like the monologues are there. So like all the stuff that's good about Hamlet is there, but it's so weird to me that some of the things that they do, because like the Shraddha Kapoor character, she really doesn't get a whole lot to do. It's kind of a shame, because she's two characters.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. She doesn't get a ton to do. I mean, whenever at the very beginning of the movie, she kind of lights up the screen in a way that like, got me a little bit excited for where things might be going. Like, there's good chemistry, there for our Hamlet and Ophelia. And then there are moments later on. Yeah, I don't know. As you mentioned, the scene, where he's shaved his head and he's kind of delivering stand-up comedy that is, sort of taking the idea of to be or not to be and playing around with how that works in this context, what it, to believe or not to believe, and all this stuff that, messing around with that, I think is really, really interesting, and sort of playing around with that with that speech as part of a notion of holding together a nation state. So that's interesting. And the performances really, really elevate things. And then, when we get to the play, and it's done as a dance number, it's done really well. But I will say that, given other Bollywood films that I've seen, I felt like this was such a westernized version of, a Hindi movie dance number, that it felt a little bit to me, I'm being so mean, but it felt to me like an American movie that wanted to do a Bollywood dance number. It did not actually, it felt like really cleaned up and not as formally inventive and just like wild as so many of those dance numbers are. It was really much more staid and Western. I kind of liked the musical number in the cemetery, the poor Yorick moment, better. Among the gravediggers. It's brief, but that one felt a little bit more surprising. Maybe because there's no dance in it.
Right.
But the dance here felt like it was very straightforward and not as intense as I'm used to. And so there was a part of me, again, it was like, as much as I liked, for instance, this earlier scene that we both talked about, where with importing Hamlet into this context, then later the sort of the justification for a big song and dance number in this particular movie by using the play, it felt easy and a little too. It felt like the easy choice and the safe choice to kind of, justify this thing that actually really distinguishes Hindi cinema. Indian cinema more broadly, because obviously there's the song and dance infuses the other traditions in India as well. So I don't know. I mean, I feel divided on it. I don't know. I think you know more about Indian cinema than I do. What was your impression? Am I a spoil sport here?
No, I think you're right. I mean, it definitely is. I wouldn't say lacking in musical numbers, but it only has what, 3? Is it 3?
Are there 3? I guess the third one is the kind of music video of Hamlet and Ophelia, like sexy time.
Yeah, hooking up, having a good time. And then there's so I guess there's 3 musical numbers, and then there's technically 4 musical numbers, but only 3 of them have like choreographed dance, because the Gravedigger one, like you mentioned, doesn't.
Yeah.
I mean, I've seen Indian cinema recently that is without musical numbers at all. Yeah. And that always is kind of, again, like for me, it's like they're trying to make a more Western style movie. I don't like that. I mean, I do, but I don't, but I do. Like, I understand that these movies are significantly longer if there's 4 10-minute songs. That's 40 minutes of a movie.
Yeah.
But at the same time, that's part of this. And like you have kind of alluded to, like, it maybe is a little, it's not whitewashed, but is there something odd about Indian actors and an Indian director actively wanting to adapt Shakespeare?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, Shakespeare should be for everyone. I
agree with that, but like, it's a weird thing because the British colony, I mean, the British were obviously colonizing everywhere, including India. So it's weird that they're like, there's this long British tradition of Shakespeare, and we want to. I would feel like it'd be like, no fucking way are we doing Shakespeare. Well, they have their own. I mean, they have their own, like, they have their own traditions, their own literary traditions, right? Like, Shakespeare is just another fucking white guy.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I don't know. I mean, interesting to consider the particular desire maybe to colonize, Shakespeare.
Right. Taking it back. But I think the sad thing is, like, the parts of the movie that are not Shakespeare related are the better parts of the movie. And they co-opt their movie to be a Shakespeare movie when it did not need it. You want to tell a story about Kashmir in 1995? Okay. I mean, Sarfaraz is a pretty good example. That's an Amir Khan movie that takes place during and kind of around the Kashmir conflict. And there are a couple other movies I've seen that's like, this is about the Kashmiri conflict. Yeah. And this one, I don't know, like, the idea of this being part of the Kashmir conflict, I get, but I don't know. It almost makes them too important when they don't need to be important at all. Not to the conflict as a whole. Does that make sense?
Yeah. No. It's really tough. The stuff about the Kashmiri conflict in it feels more kind of reverential and sort of stiff in some of the filmmaking, and I think quite possibly that's that springs from the very natural situation of taking on a very intense and important kind of topic,
right?
And wanting to do justice by it, and kind of freezing up just a little bit. But that said, it really did draw me in, wondering about the nature of this conflict, and of course the particular manifestations of terrorism, that are within the story, the particular manifestations of how justice is meted out by an unfair government in the midst of such a conflict, the way that people are disappeared and what happens to them in jail. And, one thing that I did find really interesting was the metaphor of the ghost being sort of like a living person who's been disappeared,
right,
is a ghost. That was kind of one of the things of importing the idea of the Shakespeare in that I did find to be really working, but then it had to get back to its Shakespeare plot, and I was kind of like, oh, no, I want to learn more, and so it was a little, yeah, it was a little tough that way.
I mean, to your point, the idea that the movie needs some sort of Shakespeare framework to make the story of the Kashmir conflict compelling is odd to me. Like that conflict has enough going on that you can set the story in any time during the conflict. And I think it would be interesting. I'm not a huge fan of Hamlet 2000 either. It's fine. It's perfectly fine. I think anytime we try to do like an adaptation or a retelling of Shakespeare, you always get to the point where you're like, why don't I just do something else?
Well,
and like I would be more entertaining, I guess. Like the Kashmiri stuff is so good, I don't care about the Hamlet stuff. Kashmiri stuff is so interesting that the Hamlet stuff is secondary, and I know that's not what they were going for because it feels the other direction. It feels weighted the other way.
Yeah. Well, it also raises a question for me about what we want from Shakespeare and what is best in Shakespeare. And I'm not totally sure that the plots are the best thing about Shakespeare. I mean, there's fine construction, but Shakespeare mostly stole the plots and delivered them well. It's the poetry and the intensity of the characterizations that's most exciting. I mean, my own favorite Shakespeare film is Orson Welles' Chimes at Midnight, where he really took apart, 3 plays and put together his own version that is an alternate plot about Falstaff, and that's a fascinating thing to do with Shakespeare. It elevates what Shakespeare is best at, which is the character and poetry,
right,
and shifts the emphasis away from precisely what the plot is, in addition to doing kind of a beautiful, not to get too far down the road with Orson Welles, but I'm going to do it. It does a beautiful and radical thing with these, Henry history plays and Merry Wives to kind of take Falstaff and make the tragedy about a supporting character. Shifting the kings are now the supporting characters,
right, and
the ordinary man is the tragic hero of it. This is a more exciting kind of cinematic engagement with Shakespeare than a lot of straight adaptations are. One thing that Haider made me think of a lot was a Shakespeare adaptation I really don't love, the Ian McKellen version of Richard III, where they kind of, they set it in sort of a crypto-fascist between World War I and World War II kind of aesthetic world, which does make some sense, as an updating or a kind of fantastical placement of Richard III. Nothing particularly wrong with that, but there was something about similar to in Haider. There was something about taking Richard III and trying to graft it onto the rise of fascism between World War I and World War II that was sort of trivializing ultimately, and did not turn out to be the best, at least, for me, the best kind of adaptation. As Hamlets go, I really like Michael Almereda's really swift version of it from the late 90s with Ethan Hawke. It's like 90 minutes. He really cut the thing down.
Hamlet 2000, yeah.
Yeah.
It's fine, right? Like,
yeah.
I I will say I applaud Kenneth Branagh for saying, I'm going to do Hamlet and I'm going to do the
he did the
whole
whole thing.
goddamn thing. Like, you know what, Kenneth? Good for you. We get it. We get it. But yeah, like for me, when I think of something like this, or when I think of adapting Hamlet or Shakespeare in general, Hamlet specifically, I would say that this does a good job of adapting Hamlet. If we talk about, again, like we have to deal with the fact that this movie has Hamlet in it, and that the things that we want out of the movie are less Hamlet, more everything else, or at least I don't need you to acknowledge in every fucking scene this is a Hamlet retelling. This movie, I think, is very well shot and looks rather well done in terms of production design. And to your point about that one musical number, I mean, I think it's pretty visually arresting, though. Thankfully,
it is. Yeah. No, I feel like I'm a little unfair.
No, but I mean, I agree where you're going with it, but like at the same time, like it's visually arresting.
The costumes are great. The dance moves are great. The puppets that they use in the sequence, really, really terrific kind of work. Yeah, I don't know. I'm probably being unfair. I just I do show up for the really creative shooting and cutting of a Bollywood dance number that no one in America has ever tried.
Right.
Right.
Totally.
The shooting and cutting of this stuff is like such amazing pure cinema and a whole language. I mean, I say nobody tries over here. I wouldn't try. I would have no idea how to do that. Part of my love of Indian musical numbers is like, it's unimaginable to me, and somebody did it, and it's just there's just like a pure excitement about a thing that I can't imagine how to put together.
I'm with you.
But this number, I kind of could imagine how to put it together. It starts to look a lot more traditional, but beautifully done. Beautiful design to it. The costumes are great. It is actually a sequence where the drama functions really well, cutting back to to Hamlet's parents, Haider's parents. In the audience, their eyes kind of getting wider and wider as the play is the thing. So there's a lot that works about it, but yeah, it's rough because the filmmaking energy picks up. I don't know. There's just this is a movie very much divided against itself ultimately. Like the first half, which is more glum and that I don't have as much fun with, and is maybe a bit more stiff, is also the part of the movie that I'm a little bit more invested in. Whereas like the second half that has more of pizzazz and jazz hands to it, and putting on Hamlet, it feels like it trivializes things. And when I get to images like Gertrude showing up strapped with grenades around her body, to kill everybody who's near at the end of the movie, I'm kind of like, that's a big image, but has it really earned this within a context of, horrific terrorism and, crimes against humanity that are committed in the name of this conflict? And so it was kind of hard for me to, it was hard for me to take that as Hamlet at the end. And then also that the Hamlet character doesn't get blown up, by his mother's, self-immolation. That to me felt like really not paying off the greater Oedipal attention to that relationship. And, she's, among other things, I'm not remembering the name of the actress. She's Taboo. She's fucking gorgeous in this movie. She's really, really beautiful and looks her age, but is also gorgeous. And so the scenes between her and Haider really, like the way that they play against each other, these two like really hot human beings in this mother-son relationship, it definitely, even in fairly ordinary scenes and not the ones that are more played up for the Oedipal quality, they've done, casting and acting work that is emphasizing that. And so when the ultimate tragedy is supposed to be occurring, for Hamlet to get away and not to go up in flames along with his mother feels to me like such a cheat of the potential of using the imagery this way. But then I also really feel like that imagery is cheapening the approach to the Kashmiri conflict. It's a tough, weird movie, man. This is a weird movie.
No, and I'm with you. You know, having Hamlet survive proves the point of the Kashmiri conflict side of the movie, which is revenge solves nothing. Vengeance, you know, if you're going to dig a grave, you better dig two. I mean, that's essentially what we're talking about here. And then the other side of the movie is like, no, revenge is needed. And like, revenge is part of this. And it's interesting that the movie comes down on the side of no revenge. Because again, I get why they're doing that, because they want to have a moral compass that points in a certain direction. But to your point, it's just, to me, by the end of the movie, I was just thinking to myself, if Hamlet survives, then what is the point of this story?
Yeah.
Like, actually, what is the point of the story?
I mean, that gets at like a really interesting problem of how movie storytelling works, actually. You know, it's the structures that we follow are the structures of tragedy, you know, behind Save the Cat and Robert McKee and all the other screenwriting gurus, you know, lies Aristotle, who is laying out, you know, the workings of tragedy, which then, play out in 5-act structure instead of 3-act structure with Shakespeare. But tragedy is a death drum, and so much of popular cinema, it uses the energy of tragedy plots to then manufacture happy endings instead of endings about sacrifice and endings about human machinations resulting in horror and sadness and grief. Tragedy really is, a death drum. I think especially when you stick this close and when you stage the conflict at the end in the way that this is staged, I mean, there are a lot of dead bodies left in this cemetery at the end of this movie. Snowy cemetery full of red, bloody, dead bodies. It does really feel to me like we lose something in that storytelling by not seeing the true horror. This is the thing, like Shakespeare is doing horror in a way at the end of Hamlet by choosing this ironic approach of not only did everybody kill each other and not only did it not add up to anything, but this other army has just come in and they're taking over the place anyway.
Right. It was all for naught. All for naught.
This is, there's certainly there's a cynicism to it, but there's also a sense of, the real cost of violence and of the violent emotions that everybody is going through. And so to land here, especially in this kind of conflict where that is a potent reality, that the people involved, whatever side they're on, are engaged in not just a homicidal, but a suicidal gesture.
Right.
It's real trouble. And I don't know, again, maybe someone who's more versed in the politics of this particular conflict would maybe see how Hamlet surviving is a gesture toward hope.
I'm with you. I get that part.
It feels instead like a kind of get out of jail free card, and not up to the horror that's been set up, the horror that's in the background of the whole thing.
Well, and to your point about Hamlet, being rather cynical, I wouldn't say that this is an uncynical film, but it's I don't know, like the idea of Hamlet not dying at the end would lead me to believe the film is again trying to have a message or have a point or get to the point already movie. And I don't know. I'm not saying that if you're not going to end Hamlet the way Hamlet ends, you shouldn't do Hamlet, but it's I don't know. Hamlet dying at the end is kind of part of this. It'd be like in it from Romeo and Juliet. Romeo and Juliet, just one of them survives just cause. It's like part and parcel to the entire plot. That those things have to come to fruition for Hamlet as a play, like you've already alluded to, for it to make sense narratively. Hamlet has to die. It's not my choice. I didn't write it. But if I did write a movie that was Hamlet adjacent, the ending is probably one of the few things I don't touch.
Yeah.
I mean, I retell it, redo it my own way, but and which the movie does do. I mean, that's the other thing that's kind of bizarre to me is the movie's not above making changes. No. I don't remember in the original version of Hamlet, Shakespeare writing Rosencrantz and Guildenstern get bludgeoned to death with rocks. But that happens in this movie. Pretty graphic, pretty shockingly graphic too, at least in terms of the way these two characters are being treated that up until this point have been, again, the way Rosencrantz or Guildenstern are portrayed for the most part in Hamlet. Other than the fact that these guys seem to be more malicious than normal.
Yeah. Well, no, it's interesting because, of course, Hamlet does send Rosencrantz and Guildenstern off to their deaths.
Right. He sends them off to their death.
To their death. He doesn't kill them directly. I guess he does the mob boss kind of killing, which is interesting. And that's part of the transgression of Hamlet, that revenge tragedies always involve a transgression where the revenger goes too far, and this is like one of those key moments. It goes further than killing Polonius by mistake.
Right. Right. He bludgeons them to death with rocks. Like,
yeah. No, I like that. And I like that for comic relief characters and comic relief characters that are introduced the way that they are in the video store, dancing along, with a movie on TV. That's, I do think that that's great. That's kind of bold. It's, I don't know. It's, there's a lot that I keep, I don't know. It's a problem movie, in the sense that like, as we talk about it, there are moments and touches that I do really like. And you're reminding me that, like, killing the Rosencrantz and Guildenstern characters with rocks, the grotesque intensity of that's a change that I'm all for.
Right. Same.
But in the moral universe of the film, that's also Hamlet going more personally over the edge as a revenger. And what does it mean for that revenger to survive? Does it become that much more cynical? That all the violence caused by everyone's conflicting moralities doesn't ultimately come back to get Haider, who has been immoral.
Right. Well, and that's the thing you kind of already talked about. Like the morality of the movie is strange to me because I don't necessarily understand, because again, Hamlet and the Kashmir conflict don't really go hand in hand. The movie doesn't really have much of a moral compass, which is, again, kind of odd given that the Kashmir conflict is driving so much of it. You would think that would have some factor in the movie's moral compass, but I can't tell what the movie's moral compass is, if it even has one. Because again, the Kashmir conflict, I'm not saying it's black and white, but like there are clearly aggressors and there are people that are defending against those aggressors on both sides. Yeah. This movie doesn't make that very clear. This movie is just, again, co-opting it in a way that does trivialize what it's actually about.
Well, and it starts in a place that is maybe trying to find a complexity within this, which again is, it's tricky. Like, I didn't love the dramaturgy of this moment, but it's setting me up for the rest of the movies, which is that, like, Hamlet's father is going to die because he is a doctor that decides he's going to save the life of someone on the enemy side, right. And it's because he's a doctor, and there's an exchange between him and Gertrude at the beginning when she asks, what side are you on? And then, in a very TV movie kind of way, he says, I'm on the side of life. And
I'm a doctor, Hippocratic oath and all that.
Exactly. And it's a cheesy underlining of something that I already know going on in the movie, but it is this interesting place to start that I just don't know. I'm not quite able to track that the movie takes life that seriously by the end.
Right.
The doctor at the beginning, he's going to save this guy. because he believes in life and because every human being should be, rescued from dying a very painful death of appendicitis. Okay, great. But being on the side of life is not something that I see through this. And in fact, that to me is even more reason why our Hamlet has to die. Hamlet should have to die. He should be sacrificed in order for us to be in favor of life in a way. That's the tragic morality, as the revenger goes too far, but the revenger's sacrifice can then suggest can suggest not just catharsis for the audience, but a better world that is possible.
Right.
And that's not the case in every single tragedy, but tragedies often do, in a way, Oedipus Rex, for instance, because that's one that probably people are pretty familiar with. Oedipus finds out he's the problem and he tears his eyes out. He doesn't actually die. He tears his eyes out and he leaves, but he has to leave in order for things to be better.
Right.
He has to, he's a detective who solves the crime and finds out that he's the one that committed it. And so, cosmic justice demands that he be banished.
Right.
And his own morality demands that he must blind himself after he's seen what he's seen. And this is for the good of others.
Right.
That it's the tragedy isn't just, oh, what a terrible thing happened to someone. It's the moral conflicts that result in a horrible end for a character, but that can nevertheless sort of change their world for the better.
Well, and Hamlet by the end of the play, I don't remember so much being the case, but in this movie, by the end of the movie, he's kind of like a rabid dog. And it's like, this is a dog that needs to be put down because again,
Old Yeller.
Yeah,
put down Old Yeller.
Well, Haider, at the end of the movie, he walks away from killing his uncle. To what end? To what life? Does he he just walks back to the institute where he was and just goes, okay, put me in here for good and for real this time?
Yeah.
It undercuts the idea of what the character of Hamlet means to the narrative of Hamlet, which is Hamlet is a device just like so many other things in Shakespeare. He's the device through which Shakespeare can act to get things to happen. In a similar way, the Ophelia character is in the story, and she is woefully sidelined in the second half of this movie in a way that I was not expecting, given how much of the first half of the movie she's in. But then they look away from her and it becomes more about Haider and his mother. And they kind of lose a lot of the screen time together, which Shraddha Kapoor is great, but you're not going to get a whole lot out of her if she's not on screen.
Yeah. Yeah, that's really true. And sort of a fascinating idea to mix Ophelia with Horatio, conceptually from the for the beginning of it, but Horatio then is not present for the end. And it's kind of like, wouldn't it be interesting if Ophelia / Horatio could be the one that makes it to the end of the movie, as in the play? That Ophelia, by becoming Horatio, manages to make it to the end, doesn't have to kill herself. So it's interesting the way that these changes to the plotting and characterization don't quite add up, but nevertheless produce some really fascinating moments, some great moments of acting and behavior.
Well, and to your point, Shraddha Kapoor's character not making it to the end, but being a character who makes it to the end, along with obviously being Ophelia. Not only do they kind of leave her out of the second half of the movie, she just essentially dies off screen.
Yeah.
Which is that to me was maybe the most shocking part, was that she just dies off screen.
Yeah, it's interesting. In the play, she kind of has to die off stage, but Ophelia's death has been treated, as an occasion for all manner of art, even before cinema. It's a moment that really sticks in the brain for people in a way that makes them want to see it. And in the other film adaptations of Hamlet, it is something that we see and feel horror in, when when Ophelia, kills herself. And I don't know. It's like a couple of missed opportunities rolled into one here. There's an opportunity to really let her be Horatio and make it to the end instead, and perhaps inform how this all can be seen, how it goes down. And then we also lose the opportunity of being with her in this moment of choice.
Right. Well, and to your point, not seeing it as one thing, but in this movie, her dying, it barely even does anything. And that's the sad part is,
right.
First half of the movie, her and Shahid Kapoor have great chemistry together. And then in the second half of the movie, she gets sidelined because, again, it's more about Haider and his mother and kind of the machinations between the two of them.
Yeah.
And so not only does she get essentially forgotten in the second half of the movie, but because we don't see the act of suicide, it barely even matters that she was ever there. Like, she's less of a character in this than she is less of a character as both of the characters than both of those characters are on their own in Hamlet.
Absolutely.
It's shocking.
It is. It's really shocking. And
she's just Ophelia, isn't she? Like, effectively, they say she's Ophelia and Horatio, but the fact that she's Horatio comes into this not one bit.
She's Horatio just for the very beginning,
right.
To be the first, the first real interface with Hamlet, and to sort of get the story going. But then she turns completely into Ophelia and is a particularly sidelined Ophelia. I mean, there's some actually like beautiful, charming work between the two of them in the honeymoon music video that they get.
Right.
There really are some beautiful human moments between them in what is essentially just a montage. So it's not like human moments with dialogue the dialogue that they have is fine, but it's actually more this kind of young lovers behavior between them that is very sweet and compelling, but also only goes so far.
Right. In a way that, like, she's almost not needed. Like, if you're just going to be the Ophelia character, that could have been a change that was completely necessary, which was just, there is no female companion for Hamlet in this version. And in a way, you could write her character out of this movie completely, and I don't think the movie would be less for it. I mean, it would suck that she's not in the movie, but I think you would be like, well, what an interesting choice that Hamlet doesn't have a love interest, as opposed to like his love interest is undercooked. And look, what's sad about her character being undercooked is Shraddha Kapoor is a great actress. So it's unfortunate that she's kind of not able to do what she normally does in the things that I've seen her in, which is be a really good actor. And she's just, again, it's not that she's not given a lot. It's just they don't think that the character is important enough to have her be one or the other. They just kind of have her be the least present version of Ophelia that I've ever seen in an adaptation of Hamlet. Yeah. You mentioned Hamlet 2000. What is that? Julia Stiles that's in that one? She's all over that, isn't it? She's all over that movie constantly. Like in this, it's like Shraddha Kapoor is there, but if she's meant to be portraying two characters, she's barely there as one.
Man. All right. Well, so let's emphasize the positive again.
Yeah.
I want recommendations. I loved her for as much as she's in this movie, but tell me other Shraddha Kapoor movies.
So I want to say, I'm trying to remember the name of, Boggy 3 is a lot of fun if you're looking for something that is, I don't know, Boggy and Boggy 3 are very different movies, but they're very over the top, crazy. I don't know, like it's kind of a weird thing in Indian cinema that I don't think gets represented in this country a lot through Indian cinema, which is there are Indian action movies and they are absolutely off the wall in terms of what they're doing with the genre of action. So the Boggy series with Tiger Shroff is fun. I think I want to say she's the lead in Stree, which is, I think, the thing I remember her being in the most. And Stree is a horror movie, but it's based on a Indian legend that has then come to life, and she plays that come to life. I've seen her a lot with Tiger Shroff, who she runs circles around because he's not necessarily a great actor. He's more of a face. And I mean, look, he's a really good looking guy. Like, that's the thing. And that's the thing that you kind of alluded to. Every time I watch one of these Indian movies, I'm like, these people are fucking gorgeous. Like, all of them, every
They're
single
so
one of them. But it's this
cast
thing.
is gorgeous.
But it's that thing that it feels like, that feels like the old Hollywood way, right? Like, where being a movie star meant something, as opposed to anybody can be a movie star now that they've got cameras and just point them at ourselves. Like, that for me is the thing that Indian cinema has never lost. The actors and the big name actors feel like a big deal, and they are good looking, and they have to be able to dance, and some of them don't do their own singing, and some of them do. Like, you know, you have to be a little bit of everything to be a Bollywood actor or an Indian cinema actor, which I think has been lost in the compartmentalization of the industry as it is in our country.
Yeah, we want people that went to the gym constantly.
Right.
That's our main standard.
Now.
And a lot of people look, I know it's unfortunate. And it isn't, you know, like, I'm no fan of the Marvel movies, but I'm not going to blame the Marvel movies because it started well before, you know, that we just kind of decided that you know, certain kinds of, you know, really built or really thin looks are the most important thing. And then, you know, do they give decent reaction shots and whatnot? It is a thing about Indian cinema that's really exciting. The stars are really, really stars.
It's still a thing.
Yeah.
And I haven't seen Shahid Kapoor in anything else, but I think that the energy that he brings to the Hamlet character is pretty good. Like, he's
great.
He's intense. Very intense. And I think that intense is kind of what you want with this version of Hamlet, because this is, I mean, again, this is similar to the 2000 Hamlet in that it's like kind of crime adjacent.
Yeah.
Again, like, you know, they're kind of like small time crime lords or like guerrilla warriors. And like, that's, you know, I mean, again, like I understand that transposition, like transposing Hamlet onto that kind of conflict makes sense. And yeah, I like him a lot. I actually I like all the actors in this movie a fair amount. I think KK Menon's Claudius is interesting because he's a lot more, he's more sympathetic.
He's really sympathetic
than I would have ever thought that character could be, which is, again, another interesting change in terms of the narrative. But again, like, to what end do you make the guy who is ostensibly the worst character in the entire movie or narrative? Why make him sympathetic? It doesn't necessarily get much for the audience.
Well, I guess like, you know, I could see an argument of going that direction of sympathy if it was going to play out in the kind of morality of all the mayhem that occurs, you know,
and the Kashmir side of it. If it were that, it's like, you know, be more understanding and sympathetic of people. It's like, but it's not that. This is the Hamlet part of it, and that change is being made in such a strange way.
Yeah. Interesting.
Right? It's such a weird, like, again, like, Claudius is not a sympathetic character. He's not meant to be, right? Like, not in the ways I've seen him before.
Yeah. I mean, I've seen a couple of different approaches to him. He becomes sympathetic. So one of the things is he becomes the most sympathetic in the moment just before Hamlet plans to kill him.
Right.
And he can't kill Claudius while he's praying. And, you know, that's like a beat that's done well here. But yeah, you know, Hamlet, doesn't kill him in the clutch, which then results in even more mayhem to follow in the original play. But yeah, that's a sort of interesting turn that one of the reasons for him to be a little bit more conventionally villainous, or at least oily, is so that in this moment of empathy, that there can be a really, you know, a nice turn there, and it's not an automatic thing that, oh well, Claudius is actually too nice for Hamlet to kill.
Right. It's not that, and it's not that in this movie, but he's the least villainous of the versions I've seen. I mean, again, like in a lot of ways, like it almost feels like, again, like, did he do what he did by accident? Like, I don't, kind like, right? Like he killed Hamlet's father by accident in this one. No?
Yeah, I mean, I think effectively that's right. And that's
right. Which is fucking bizarre in and of itself. Like now he is kind of a sympathetic character.
Well, and I guess, to go back to the original, there's a lot of did he or didn't he? It was the ghost lying,
right?
Is Hamlet just sort of conjuring fantasies because he's upset that his father has died and sees his uncle as a usurper? Is it something that Hamlet is cooking up in his mind, and that's a kind of drama? But yeah, here it feels a little too set as an answer that like, oh, it's by accident rather than that.
Right.
It's an ambiguity up until, the sort of moment of confession, which is also the moment of greatest humanity when Hamlet can't kill him.
Right. Well, and I mean, what's also interesting is, so we have Hamlet unable to kill him twice.
Right.
But the mother in the original doesn't blow everybody up with a suicide vest.
No, it's wonderful. She drinks poison.
Right.
The poison is and the poison in that final scene kind of kills everybody.
Right. Right. Exactly.
It really, even if you get stabbed, you're being stabbed by a sword, rapier that has poison on it. So it's the big metaphor there, Shakespeare.
Right.
Yeah, the poison of the whole scene. So I do find there to be something compelling about the like suicide bomb scenario.
Yeah, me too. It's just they don't do it the way they're supposed to.
Yeah, it's just and again, that kind of imagery from this particular kind of conflict just becomes really troublesome as a clever way to replace the poison in Shakespeare. I don't know. Again, to me, it feels like much as I love Shakespeare, Shakespeare cheapens what's going on.
Well, and I would say it cheapens what's going on the most when we have Haider killing the Laertes version of that character in this movie.
That's also kind of accidental too. That's not, in the play. That, I mean, it's a gnarly accidental death. I definitely okay, spoiler alert, but falling and hitting your head on a gravestone, that is legit filmed well, and also a particularly like nightmarish death scenario.
Right. Rather ignominious end, as it were.
Yeah.
But I as much as I enjoy that scene, I think the fact that it's like Hamlet adjacent undercuts the scene. Because again, it feels like it's forced into the movie. Like we understand that Haider and Laertes have a conflict, but they haven't really shared screen much in this movie with one another, if at all. I think they're maybe in one scene together.
Well, again, it's the way that the Ophelia of this story disappears. That also means that Laertes tends to disappear. So it's a kind of, and then do you need, it just becomes like, well, why don't you just get rid of that character?
Right. Yeah, that's what I mean. Like it serves no purpose.
This is like always one of the big things about Shakespeare cutting is that like people will actually preserve too much and they won't cut the right kinds of things. Like if you're going to cut down a Shakespeare, you have to, it's not just being judicious. You have to throw some babies out with the bathwater. If you're going to cut certain elements, you are then following threads because Hamlet is so tightly knit. The poetry of it and everything is so tightly knit. And again, this is the Hamlet 2000 thing where I do really like the Michael Almereyda version. He was ruthless in cutting out anything that did not fit, the main thrust of this. And so it's like, this speech is out, that speech is out, this famous line is out, that famous line is out. We are whittling this down to, a 90-minute, contemporary set version of this story. And yes, there will still be the poetry in there, but it's going to be one thin selection of the poetry. And And so in a way, it brings up the problem of cutting Shakespeare. You're going to make certain changes, like just cut these characters. They don't make any sense in this setting. You don't need them for all of this conflict to work.
Right. And the ones that you do need are done well, but the ones that you don't need stick out like sore thumbs, like Laertes in this, or even the Fortinbras stand-in, who's barely in the Ashwath Bhatt character's barely even in the movie. Like, why have a stand-in for that character when that literally doesn't matter in this movie?
No, it doesn't come in. I mean, like the whole importance of Fortinbras is we're going to talk about him every so often, and then at the end, only at the end does he finally arrive, but this is the opposite. It's kind of like we get this brief glimpse for I'm not sure what purpose, and then it is not the same kind of arrival that just blows everything up,
Right. Well, and I think to your point, like the suicide bomber of it all, that would have been the way to have the movie end, is with, Haider and his uncle both dying in the same explosion.
Absolutely.
We're not dying immediately, but we kind of see that his uncle is sans legs by the end of the movie, or sans feet at least. So he's going to bleed out unless someone comes and saves him. Having Haider walk off into the sunset effectively, just for me, it undercuts what Shahid Kapoor has been doing all film. It kind of undercuts what Tabu's been doing the entire film, which is building up to this moment where their two characters are now connected. Because we see earlier in the movie, she threatens to kill herself with a gun if he doesn't decide to go away, as opposed
she's that mother.
Right. And that's the thing. Like you would think that scene at the end of the movie would be the moment of fruition finally coming into effect. And instead, it kind of is in the sense of the narrative, but he should have been part of that. There's no universe where this makes any sense.
It would not be more Oedipus Rex, but it would be more Oedipal to have, Gertrude, Hamlet, and Claudius all go up in the same flames at the end. There really would be, something there. And again, speaking to the end of the original Hamlet, that's where the poison sort of comes into it.
Right. Singularly, as it were.
Yeah. So yeah, I don't know. I want to like it better.
Well, and that's the thing. It's like I do as well, but at the same time, it disappoints me that it's a Hamlet adaptation. Like that was the reason I wanted to watch it, because like, oh, that sounds interesting. Hamlet adaptation set during the Kashmir conflicts of '95. But maybe would there have been a better Shakespeare? I mean, other than Romeo and Juliet, would there have been a better Shakespeare play to do over a military conflict?
Well, I'm
trying to remember what the one with Ralph Fiennes is. They adapted it rather recently, but that's a Shakespeare thing about like military, right?
Yeah. Was it? I'm trying to remember which one it was. I didn't see it, so I'm having trouble.
Did an episode.
Was it Coriolanus?
Yeah, that's what it was.
Yeah, Coriolanus might be better. You would have to kind of choose a side if you did Macbeth, but Macbeth is really Macbeth makes for a particular kind of statement about violence and power relationships, though I don't know that necessarily best fits this one. I mean, I wouldn't want to see Romeo and Juliet in this setting because I feel like that really would trivialize, but at least the central situation would kind of, make some sense. The Capulets and Montagues arrayed against each other in a way that is ultimately fruitless and horrific. But yeah, maybe there would be better tragedies to go with. Lear doesn't really fit. That's another. You got me going down a route of thinking, does Lear work? No, Lear doesn't work.
Lear doesn't work either.
And let's save Lear for Ron anyway. We haven't mentioned. I mean, very, very different kind of context, obviously. But the Kurosawa Shakespeare adaptations create an interesting comparison point.
It's funny. I've seen Ron, and I remember enjoying it. But again, like that's more. I don't know. I don't want to say it's more straightforward, but it kind of is. Like that's the thing about this is like, if you're going to do Hamlet, don't set it in the Kashmir conflict. Just set it in. I mean, again, like I'm not saying do something really pedestrian, but I'm saying do something that's a little less heated than this already is to begin with. And how not problematic, but again, like how opinionated and incendiary that this can get very quickly. Or if you want to be ironic, nuclear, it could go.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Well, and Kurosawa sets his versions in a fantasy Japan of the past.
Right.
So it's there's something very pure in the adaptation of those. So yeah, the sort of, I don't know. I'm not against contemporary updating.
Me either.
Everybody should own this. I will say that I am most interested in the way that the to be or not to be, which is the most famous part of Hamlet, does get a kind of serious change to being more about a nation, more about a people, more about a kind of civic identity than it is about an individual person in this context. That's where it feels, and that's, if I were to guess what the inspiration for the whole thing was, it might be that, that's the thing that we start from as like why Hamlet is best to adapt here. But it runs away with itself. And it's no Strange Brew, which it's a great Hamlet adaptation.
The best, one might say.
The best.
Yeah, I'm with you. I'm not against updating the Hamlet or any of Shakespeare's kind of stories, but I do think sometimes trying to ground them in reality, as opposed to, the Coriolanus film, if I remember it correctly, it's just set in some Eastern European state, kind of like Ron is, where it's like, it's just where it's being set is not important. If it factors into it, that's the choice that we're going to make, but it doesn't necessarily have to influence everything. And that's where I think this movie, again, fails, however you want to look at it. Like, it's a failure and a success at the same time, which I think, to your point, it makes it kind of a weird movie. Because for me, the places where it succeeds and the places where it fails are happening at the same time, on top of each other, as it were. So, I don't know. Like, I would be curious to see some of the other adaptations that he's done of Shakespeare. Vishwal Bharwaj has a very interesting eye in terms of production, in terms of the way things are shot. He uses zooms a lot and like focus zooms a lot, which is kind of fun. But I like his eye for cinema and the filmic language that he uses. However, it's just a little too much here to try to make two things be one. So that's that's my kind of with Shakespeare, especially with this kind of Shakespeare, it's kind of hard to do a lot with it. You have to kind of pick your battles accordingly and wisely, because otherwise you will get bogged down in all of this. And this movie, with a 2.5 hour time limit, it's only like 30 minutes, 40 minutes shorter than the Kenneth Branagh one, which is everything. That's like 3 hours, right? Like it
runs close to 4 hours, actually.
This is only an hour and a half away. Like, that's not that much ground to cover. It's really not.
No, well, there are ways to get it there, especially when you're... the big changes that are made are big, but one of the things that's really funny is the Hamlet plot really starts properly with the arrival of the ghost, which is held off until fairly late. There are Hamlet elements before that. It's sort of like rearranged. So I don't want to be like, oh, there's no Hamlet before that. But it's like within the Hamletness of the movie, it really gets going when the ghost shows up, which is not surprising because the ghost is in scene 1 of Shakespeare's Hamlet. And that's where the plot really gets going, because it requires this not just jealousy of Claudius, but suspicion of Claudius.
Right.
And so there's, Haider is jealous, but he's kind of hanging out for a long time. And so is the rest of the plot. But the hanging out, again, I got to say, the purpose of the hanging out is actually making room for more serious consideration of Kashmir than we get in the second half. So it's I don't know, it's a fascinating mixed bag. And I guess, especially talking about it, I am now really glad that I saw it there was a point where I was cursing because I was
Oh,
really not enjoying the film. I was like, oh no, I got to do this.
it's another bad movie on the Kulturecast, huh?
Well, different kind of thing. Like when we did Roman Polanski's Pirates, which is an utterly horrible film. This is so far superior to Roman Polanski's Pirates.
This is a movie. This actually
this is
works.
a movie. Yeah. Roman Polanski's Pirates is like, it's a lot of sets and costumes and people, but I'm not sure that there is a movie. But at any rate, that has a different kind of angle because, like, I've seen most of Roman Polanski's other films, and this is this one that stands out as particularly bad. Its reputation precedes it, and so there's a fascination in seeing that. This was one where I don't have that sense of the reputation preceding it, but there was a point of a slog for me where I was like, oh no, I gotta talk about this. But I came around on it, and then especially talking to you, I'll give it more. I'll say that it's problematic rather than bad, and I think interesting for people that want to look at Shakespeare adaptations. I'll give it that.
And look, we are also kind of in the minority here because it is a rather well-received movie.
It would have to be beloved, and I'm like,
it was a major commercial success, and also at the Filmfare Awards, it received 5 awards, which was Best Actor, Best Supporting Actor, and Best Supporting Actress were part of that. I think they probably won Best Film, Best Director, I'm assuming. But I mean, okay. I mean, again, like, we're in the wrong here. That's fine. Like, so did La La Land for a minute.
Yeah, well, La La Land almost did. And there's, the Paul Haggis Crash, not the One True Crash by David Cronenberg.
Right. Exactly.
There's, the Oscars have given awards to lots of worse movies than this. So,
for sure. It's well made, well acted, but therein lies the problem. Like, the problems are not easily spottable by just looking at the movie. It's part and parcel. I wonder if you've never seen Hamlet, if you would enjoy this more.
Yeah, so
the thought experiment we can't do, but
I didn't say this, but I did go in cold, and I didn't know I was getting Hamlet, and then I clocked it in the scene where he walks in and he sees Gertrude and Claudius, and I was like, oh wait, is this Hamlet? and
it's only like 20 minutes into the movie, by the way.
I know. I went for a while, kind of taking it on its own terms and everything, and then and then I was like, I think this might be Hamlet, and I looked it up, and then it was. So I had a brief, maybe I would have had the full experience had I been in a movie theater and not at home, where I readily, break out my phone and go, okay, am I going to have to rewind the movie a little bit on Netflix? Right. But I, had to Wikipedia it. And of course, the first thing it says is an adaptation of Hamlet. And I was like, this is what I'm watching now.
Yay, is what you were saying, clearly.
Yay.
Spencer, final thoughts on Haider.
Final thoughts on Haider. Interesting movie. Interesting kind of artistic problem. And I would highly recommend students of Shakespeare watch it as an adaptation to sort of check out the workings and misworkings of it. It also, I guess, I'm going to have to look up a bit more about the Kashmir conflict, because I feel like I know just enough to be dangerous before watching this, and then it tells me a little bit more. But that was the part of the movie that was the most fascinating to me, and I feel like I need to know a lot more, because this, in fact, is not a good movie for learning about the Kashmir conflict.
No, it is not. A better piece of media to learn about the Kashmir conflict may be Curfewed Night, which this movie is also based on. But I think that's more the idea of setting it in Kashmir, because no, Hamlet is not set in Kashmir originally. But wouldn't that be fun if it was? I think for me, I enjoyed this movie just fine. Hamlet and Shakespeare are things that, for me, I have a very interesting relationship with, just given the fact that I grew up in this country and I was in advanced English classes where that was taught, that was drilled into me how important it was. And then I realized in the real world, it is not really that it's important. It's that it sets the stage for other things to come in and be much more important. But because of what it is, it sets the stage. So that has to be acknowledged. And again, sometimes that's the best way to adapt Hamlet, is to just use Hamlet as set, or any Shakespeare for that matter, as its set dressing, and then have your own world within that doing its own thing. This movie kind of does a little bit of column A, a little bit of column B, which is kind of why we're at the point we are with this movie, with it being kind of a success, kind of a failure. I'm with you. I think it's an interesting movie for anyone who wants to see a version of Hamlet that is not just a bunch of white people for the most part. Because again, yeah. Kenneth Branagh's version, just a bunch of white people. The Hamlet from 2000, just a bunch of white people, best I can remember. This one, the white actors in the movie are the worst part of the movie. That's the worst part of the movie. Or the 3 times we see like English actors who are just going, ugh, in one scene, and then in another scene, just randomly like B-rolled in there for no reason.
I get perverse enjoyment from those moments in Indian movies, though.
Me too. Really, where it's like, that's what they think, huh? That's what they think of us.
That was like my favorite thing about Lagan, back when I saw that. Is like just how mean it is to the white people. I'm like, I am here for it.
They deserve it. And in Lagan, I mean, they're British. In this movie, they could be, who knows? Like
tourists,
Yeah. Tourists in Kashmir, of all places. Like, well, there's a conflict going on. Like, are y'all lost? But I think for me, I picked it because it was a Hamlet adaptation and I wanted to see what that looked like. And I had heard the movie was well received. So that's why we're here. That's why we watched it. I don't think it disappointed. I just think it definitely left me wanting more of something else. That it does give from time to time, which is kind of the strange, the fuckaroo of it all. So on that note, we'll take a break, play some ads, and when we come back, we'll talk about what Mike White and I are covering next week.
From Weirding Way Media, Cambridge and Washawn is a podcast about 2 guys' obsessions, passions, and hobbies. Those 2 guys are
Mark Begley, host of Wake Up Heavy, Recollections of Horror,
and Ronald Zerigian, host of the Skelevator YouTube channel.
Each month we talk about the toys, comics, movies, books, TV shows, and other cultural phenomena that captured our imaginations and helped shape who we are today.
From Masters of the Universe to Saturday Night Live, Star Wars to Harry Houdini, The Muppets to The Elephant Man, Ronnie and Mark dive deep into the recesses of their minds to pull out treasured memories of things lost but never forgotten.
Join us on the first Tuesday of each month over at weirdingwaymedia.com or wherever you listen to podcasts.
Join me, Jamie Benning, on the Filmumentaries podcast, particularly if you enjoy stories like designer Nilo Rodis Jamiro convincing George Lucas to push him around to help gain the support of his crew on the ailing Howard the Duck.
Blam! The door opens, it's George. Everybody gasps. George makes a beeline to me. I'm literally back against the wall.
Or hear puppeteer Tim Rose's emotional story behind that iconic Admiral Akbar shot in Return of the Jedi.
I believe that war is something to be proud of, but not to celebrate.
Or how Star Wars editor Paul Hirsch tackled cutting so many successful films.
The thing that I learned from working with De Palma is that tension depends on a clock. You need to have the sense that time is running out.
Maybe Oscar-winning sound designer Mark Mangini's insightful chat about his work on Blade Runner 2049.
Not a single sound from the original Blade Runner in the new film. A great deal of inspiration.
That's the Filmumentaries podcast with me, Jamie Benning.
Hello, Twisted Humans. Do you find yourself wanting to know more about the latest murder, conspiracy, cult, or haunting? Then this is the podcast for you. In 1952, there was a record high of UFOs reported. 1,500 sightings.
There has been evidence of human sacrifice, devil worship, and it is haunted by more spirits than can be counted.
A family of 2 adults and 2 kids reportedly saw a giant flying thing with glowing red eyes.
And meanwhile, the family's nanny that helped Veronica to care for her and Lucian's children was found bludgeoned to death in the basement of their family home. I'm Alicia.
And I'm Sierra, and this is Twisted and Uncorked.
कनेक्शन भी ना कमाल की चीज है, बस हो गया तो हो गया। वाईफाई ब्लूटूथ से भी ज्यादा स्ट्रांग है अपना कनेक्शन। उस स्टार नहीं है, दुनिया है मेरी। दूर से तो कच्चे वाले फैंस तालियां बजाते हैं, मैं तो गले लगा के दे के आऊंगा उसको ट्रॉफी। जब देखो आर्यन आर्यन आर्यन, लगता क्या है तू आर्यन खन्ना का फैन।
A small birthday gift to the love of my life, Aryan Khanna.
Happy birthday, Senior.
फैन है, अपने आप को जूनियर आर्यन खन्ना बोलता है।
Listen to me carefully. जो तुमने किया है वो गलत है। मैंने इतना कुछ किया आपके लिए और आप तुम होते कौन हो मेरे लिए कुछ भी करने वाले? आपका फैन? तुम नहीं हो मेरे फैन। ऐसा मत बोलो, आपकी लाइफ के 5 मिनट भी नहीं मिल सकते मुझे क्या? मेरी लाइफ है, मेरा टाइम है, तुम्हें 5 सेकंड भी क्यों दूं? पहले फैन स्टार के पीछे भागता था, अब स्टार फैन के पीछे भागेगा। मैं आप लोगों के जरिए सबको वार्न करना चाहता हूं, वो कभी भी किसी को भी चोट पहुंचा सकता है। गौरव है तो आर्यन है, गौरव नहीं तो आर्यन कुछ भी नहीं।
So in the next episode of the Kulturecast, Mike White and I are going to be watching Fan, which is a Shah Rukh Khan film where he plays a fictionalized version of himself and then an obsessed fan version of himself digitally de-aged. It sounds fucking insane. The trailer for the movie is fucking insane. And I hope that the movie is fucking insane because it sounds pretty high concept to me. Like I mentioned, Mike White will be joining me, so that should be a good time. We've been talking about doing that movie for 1.5 years now. So we're finally going to get to watch it. And you'll get to hear the episode here in about a week. But until then, Spencer, where can people find you and the things that you work on?
I suppose I'm on social media, but I'm on Twitter, which I'm not going to call X. I guess I just did, but I'm on Twitter, which is a pathetic, sad shadow of itself that I'm enjoying on some level seeing immolate, but it's getting boring. I gotta say, Twitter has lasted a lot longer than I expected when I was like, ride or die. I want to see it die. But now I'm a little bit like, I think I gotta get away from here. It's the decay is not as fun as I expected. And I'm on Instagram, which is all ads, telling me how I can poop better. So, those are, for whatever reason, and now everybody knows too much about me. The Instagram algorithm wants to tell me how to poop. I don't know why that is, but at any rate, I'm there. I teach at Northwestern University, working on a film that hopefully by fall is going to be done. But I feel like for luck, I'm knocking on wood right now because I spoke of an end date for this film. But it's got to be done really soon, and so then I'll be putting it out in the world and letting people tear me apart for a change.
Right. Do what we do, but someone will do that to you. That's what
someone
happens.
will definitely. Yeah, I will. I will shut down my letterboxd the day that that movie becomes publicly available. I'm better off not knowing.
That's fair.
Yeah.
Well, speaking of knowing and knowing where to look for things, to hear people talking about things that they know, Weirding Way Media is the place to listen to anything pop culture, be it movies, TV, true crime, paranormal. That's where you need to go, including the projection booth where Spencer and I met many moons ago. I can't even remember what on at this point. Was it some sort of African or South American movie? Mike White's programming is all over the place.
Might have been Czech. I get pulled in for a lot of Czech.
Did we do the commentary together? Was that how we met?
Oh, yeah. All My Good Countrymen.
Yeah, okay, there we go. So, yeah, you can actually hear Spencer and I in physical media form in the second run film release of All My Good Countrymen, which is a Czech film. And as you can tell, Spencer and I are Czech film experts.
Truly one of my favorite films that I've seen in the last few years.
Yeah. Well, and hey, getting to do a commentary ain't a complaint either. That was 2020, by the way. That was April of 2020. So known each other for about 4 years now. But Spencer's been on a couple episodes of the Kulturecast before. He's been on the projection booth, and he was also on Scary Stories We Tell, which is kind of sitting, waiting for the moment. But all those things, including a whole host of other things, can be found at weirdingwaymedia.com. Aside for one thing, which can be found at patreon.com/Kulturecast, which is Rankin' on Bond, where every month Mike White and Richard Haddam and I sit and talk about James Bond, chronologically, movie by movie. If that's something you're into, $10 on Mike White's Patreon or my Patreon will get you monthly access to that. Spencer, thank you so much for joining me. Well, I would say finally.
Thank you.
Finally, we found time.
Well, we'll do those other movies soon enough.
I know the movies that are more fun theoretically.
I'm excited. I'm really excited for them. They are more fun, but this always a pleasure. Always a pleasure.
Yeah, likewise. And as always, we'll catch you on the next episode.